They say that certain moments stay with you forever, lingering like shadows, silent but ever present. It's been 2 years since that day, 2 years since everything shifted. It was supposed to be simple, a trip to the beach with my son Leonard. My husband Phoenix couldn't make it. He never could. His work always took priority, and I had grown accustomed to that, to being on my own. But that day, it felt different. Not then, not now. We laid out the towels and the sun was warm, maybe even too warm. I finally laid down, relieved to be away from the noise of the world, and I asked Leonard to help rub some oil on my back. I didn't think twice about it. He's my son, my boy. Why would I? At first, it was nothing. Just his hands, just him helping me. But then I felt it. I felt him linger lower and lower, and I didn't stop him. Why didn't I stop him? You think you know yourself, you think you know your family, but there's always a moment, just one moment, that can unravel everything. For me, that moment happened that day on the beach, and I've never been the same since. Phoenix and I had been married for over 15 years. If you asked anyone who knew us, they'd say we were the perfect couple. Nice house, good kids, steady life. But you don't notice the cracks until you're inside the walls. You don't feel the emptiness unless you're the one living it. For years, Phoenix's job was his life. He always worked late, nights, weekends, holidays. I used to tell myself it was for us, that the overtime and dedication were for the life he was building for our family. But after a while, that story starts to fall apart. What good is a home if no one's ever in it? I became invisible to him. When he came home, he barely looked at me. He stopped asking how I felt, what I wanted, or what I needed. Our conversations were brief, mostly about bills, groceries, or the kids. He loved Leonard and his little sister Issa. But even with them, his presence felt like a shadow. He was there, but not really. I used to sit across from him at the table, wondering if he still saw me at all. I remember that morning when Phoenix hurried out the door. He grabbed his briefcase, kissed Isa's head, and glanced at me just once. Sorry, Freya. I can't make it today. Something came up at work. I didn't argue. I just nodded, like I always did, my throat tight. I told myself it was fine. Leonard and I could go alone. Leonard was 16 back then, tall and lanky, with brown eyes just like his father's, but a softer face. He didn't say much, not even when I told him it would be just the two of us. I think he'd gotten used to his dad backing out too. He just shrugged, grabbed the bags and followed me to the car. I watched him in the passenger seat on the drive there, earbuds in, staring out the window like any teenager. I couldn't help but smile. He was growing up so fast. Sometimes I wondered if I'd blink and lose him too. The drive to the beach felt endless. My mind wandered, as it always did, back to Phoenix. I thought about all the things we used to do, movie nights, long walks, trips to nowhere just for fun. I thought about the way he used to touch me, the way his eyes would light up when he saw me. I hadn't felt that in years. I hadn't felt anything. I was so tired of being unseen. We finally arrived, and Leonard helped me carry the bags to a quiet spot near the water. I laid out the towels while he set up the umbrella. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt the need to talk to him. Maybe it was because he was the only one there. Maybe I just needed someone to hear me. "It's nice to get out, don't you think?" I said, trying to sound cheerful. He just nodded, pushing his hair back with his hand. "Yeah, Mom. It's nice." I laid down on the towel, feeling the warmth of the sun seep into my skin. I didn't move for a while. I just let myself be still, trying to release the weight of the last few years, even if only for an hour. But then, I remembered the oil. I sat up and turned to Leonard. "Can you help me rub this on my back? I can't reach it myself," I asked. He hesitated for a moment before taking the bottle from my hand. I laid back down, facing the towel, and waited. His first touch was gentle, unsure, like he didn't want to hurt me. I smiled to myself, remembering when he was little and used to hold my hand to cross the street. His hands were so small back then. "You can press a little harder," I told him, my voice muffled. "It's okay." He listened, and his hands grew firmer as he rubbed the oil across my shoulders and down my back. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the warmth, the rhythm of his touch. For a moment, I allowed myself to enjoy it. It had been so long since anyone had touched me, and that thought hit me harder than I wanted to admit. But then, I felt his hands move lower, slowly, carefully down the curve of my back. My breath caught in my throat. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. My mind raced, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was fine, that he was just helping, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't. His hands lingered near the edge of where my towel ended. I could feel his hesitation. I could feel my own. Instead of stopping him, I said, "It's okay. You can rub there too." The words hung in the air, poisonous, and the moment they left my mouth, I knew I couldn't take them back. Leonard didn't say anything. He didn't stop either. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling his hands lower than they should have been. My heart pounded so hard, I thought he might hear it. I wanted to sit up, to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. I let it happen. Even now, I don't know why. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe I was too desperate to feel wanted, even if it was wrong. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. That day on the beach, everything inside me broke, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, if you've made it this far into the story, thank you for sticking with me. I know it's not easy to hear, and I appreciate you listening. If you found this video interesting, or if you think someone else might relate to what I'm sharing, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing stories like this and lets me know I'm not alone. All right, let's get back to it. After that day at the beach, something changed. I couldn't ignore it. What I felt, what I saw, and how Leonard looked at me afterward. It wasn't just a lingering glance or a brief moment. It was constant. Every time I caught his eye, something had shifted in him, something I didn't want to name but couldn't unsee. I tried to bury it when we got home that evening. I did everything I could to act normal. I made dinner, asked Leonard about school, folded laundry late into the night, my hands shaking the whole time. I kept replaying everything that had happened. His hands, the way he lingered, the tension in my own body. I hated myself for it, and I hated him for making me feel this way about my own son. Phoenix didn't notice a thing. He came home late as usual, his tie loose, his face tired. He kissed my cheek out of habit. Just a ghost of what it used to be. "Long day?" I asked, hoping for some kind of conversation. He grunted and nodded, already halfway to the living room. It was always like this. His presence felt like an afterthought, and I felt invisible again. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Phoenix snored softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about Leonard, about his hands, about his gaze. I knew it wasn't right. I knew I should stop whatever was happening before it went any further. But there was another part of me, something dark, something lonely, that wanted to hold on to it, that craved the attention, the touch, the feeling of being seen. The days passed and Leonard didn't say anything, but his silence was louder than words. He didn't avoid me, not exactly. Instead, it was like he stayed closer. I'd catch him watching me when I cooked, when I cleaned, when I sat alone on the couch at night. And I let it happen. I didn't stop him. I didn't stop myself then. The following weekend came and the heat returned, making the house feel suffocating. Phoenix was away working on a last-minute project, leaving just me and Leonard like it had been before. I asked him if he wanted to go to the beach again, just the two of us. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe I thought being outside would clear my mind, or maybe I wanted to see if I could push everything aside. The drive was quiet this time. Leonard didn't wear his earbuds, just sat there, looking out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. When we got to the beach, it was nearly empty. I remember how vivid the blue of the water was and how the breeze felt on my face. I spread out the towels again, just like before, and Leonard helped me set everything up. I didn't ask him to rub oil on my back this time. I couldn't. Instead, I lay there with my eyes closed, pretending everything was fine. But even with my eyes shut, I could feel his gaze. I could feel him watching me. The real turning point came later that afternoon. We decided to rinse off in the beach showers before heading home. It was supposed to be quick, just to wash off the sand, but something happened then that I still can't explain. When we reached the showers, Leonard stepped in first, letting the water run down his back. I stood to the side, watching him for a moment before I stepped in too. I don't know what came over me, but I took off my outer clothing and stood beside him, the water cooling against my skin. Leonard looked at me, surprised, confused, or something else, but he didn't say anything. I glanced at him, really looked at him, and said, "You should take off your shorts too. You need to rinse properly." I don't know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I could still control things, that I could make it stop. Or maybe I was testing him, testing myself. He hesitated for a second, then did as I asked, sliding off his shorts. There we were, alone with the water pouring down on us, washing everything away except what we were both feeling. I turned my back to him and softly asked, "Help me with my back?" He did. His hands were gentle again, just like before, but there was no mistaking the tension. I felt it in him and in myself. When his hands touched my waist, I froze. The air thickened around us, and the sound of the water drowned out everything else. I could have walked away. I could have stopped it. But instead, I leaned back closer to him. I reached for his hands and guided them to my chest. When I did, he didn't pull away. What happened next, I can't explain. I won't explain. It was a moment, a blur of need, loneliness, and something else I can't name. It wasn't soft. It wasn't slow. It was desperate, passionate, wrong in every way, but I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. When it was over, we just stood there, the water still pouring down on us, washing away the evidence but not the truth. He held me then, like no one else had in years, and I let him. Afterward, we didn't speak. We dried off, packed up, and walked back to the car in silence. I kept my eyes on Leonard from the corner of mine. His face was flushed, his movements stiff. I knew I'd ruined everything. I knew we'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and yet, for the first time in years, I felt alive. The ride home was quiet at first. The car felt small, suffocating, like the air itself was pressing down on us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road, but my mind was spinning. I could still feel him. Leonard, his hands, his body, the weight of everything we'd just done. I kept glancing at him in the passenger seat. He sat stiffly, staring out the window, his face flushed, his jaw tight. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost unsure. I couldn't look at him, but I heard him. What just happened back there? My heart skipped a beat. For a moment I thought about pretending I hadn't heard him, about brushing it off, changing the subject. But there was no point in pretending anymore, not after what we had done. I took a shaky breath and answered, "I don't know." It was the truth, or at least the closest thing to it. I didn't know what had happened or why. All I knew was that everything had changed. We didn't talk again until we pulled into the driveway. I turned off the car, but neither of us moved. Leonard finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that scared me. It wasn't confusion, guilt, or shame. It was longing. "How long have you felt like this?" he asked. His words sent chills through me because I had been asking myself the same question. I looked at him then, and it was like a dam broke inside me. "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe longer than I want to admit." We were both quiet after that, just sitting there in the dark. I thought that would be it, that we'd go inside, try to forget it all, and pretend nothing had happened. But Leonard had other plans. Before I could open the door, he leaned over and kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I let him kiss me, and I kissed him back. Then I lost control. I don't know if it was the loneliness, the years of neglect, or the way Leonard looked at me like no one had in so long, but I let it happen right there, outside our house. Leonard pulled me to him, his hands moving over me like they belonged there. I felt alive. I felt wanted. I felt seen for the first time in years. I didn't care about anything else. I don't know how long we stayed like that, tangled up in each other, but eventually we moved inside. I don't remember much about the walk to the door, just the feeling of his hand on mine, the quiet between us buzzing like electricity. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Once we were inside, everything escalated, like we'd been holding back for too long, and the dam had finally burst. The next few days were a blur. Leonard stayed close, always finding reasons to brush against me or look at me when no one else was watching. I told myself to stop, to pull away, to end whatever this was, but every time I looked at him, I saw the same loneliness I felt. It was like we were mirrors of each other, reflecting the same need, the same emptiness. And I couldn't say no. I didn't want to. At night, I'd lie in bed next to Phoenix, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing. I'd think about Leonard in the next room, about the way his hands felt, the way he made me feel alive again. Then I'd close my eyes, guilt curling up in my chest like a snake. I knew it couldn't last. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. The tension between us grew stronger every day until it finally exploded. One late evening, Phoenix was at work again. Issa was asleep, and Leonard and I were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, trying to keep my mind off everything, when I felt him behind me. I turned around and there he was, looking at me the same way he had on the beach. "Leonard," I said softly, trying to warn him, but he didn't stop. He stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. "Mom," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his room, to leave me alone. But I didn't. Instead, I looked up at him and said the one thing I shouldn't have. I can't stop either, and that was it. That was the moment everything fell apart. Leonard kissed me again, harder this time, desperate, and I kissed him back. I didn't care that it was wrong. I didn't care about Phoenix or Issa or the life we had built. All I cared about was him, Leonard, my son, the only person who made me feel like I mattered. Since that day on the beach, things have never gone back to normal. In fact, I'm not sure they ever will. Leonard and I crossed a line, one that can't be erased, no matter how hard I try to convince myself otherwise. What started as a moment has turned into something I can't control. The guilt is there, heavy and constant, but it doesn't stop me. And that's the part that scares me the most. I look at my husband, Phoenix, and my daughter, Issa, every day and wonder how they don't see it, how they don't notice the cracks spreading through our family. Maybe they're too caught up in their own lives to see me slipping, or maybe I've just gotten better at hiding it. But deep down, I know this can't last forever. Secrets have a way of coming out, and when they do, the fallout will destroy everything I've tried to stop. I've told myself over and over again that this is wrong, that Leonard deserves better, that I deserve better. But every time he touches me, every time he looks at me like I